well, this weekend we saw the celebration of color and a beautiful people, and it was definitely something that actually excited the city of Johannesburg. That was Pride, and it painted the city in vibrant color under that theme, purely, queerly, and African. Yet there were many conversations that were happening in the lead up in this year's Pride, and we're like, let's find out what was happening here, because there's so many different sub themes that happened, and there were a lot of terms that were new for even some of us, something called pink washing, rainbow washing, and it was a concept that I firstly got introduced to while I was following this controversy, because I'm like, what's rainbow washing? I mean, some people are saying it's when corporates come in, they're not really aligned to the cause of the LGBTQIA community. However, when something happens like an event, they would probably tag themselves, not for the intent of the overall interest of the community, but for commercial reasons. So we're going to be speaking to Kaye Ally to tell us a little bit about this one, founder and director of Johannesburg Pride and Pride of Africa. Kaye, thank you for joining us right here on Channel Africa.
Thank you for having me.
Let's talk a little bit about Pride. The idea of Pride is not just something that is of a protest, right? A protest is so important, of course, and it is at the root of why Pride is there and how it was formed. But more and more, the celebration is of an important cause. So as things change and as the environments change and the challenges persist, is it difficult to navigate some of these reasons behind what Pride is all about? Or do you think it's an amalgamation of all these complexities?
I think it's an amalgamation of all these complexities. Visibility and awareness is critical. So amplifying the voice, which is why we march. The tone of the march is what every individual brings to it. As Johannesburg Pride's organizer team, we create a platform. We cannot dictate what form of activism is more important to one person and less important to the next. If you look at it, we are catering for the LGBTQ plus community. That in itself has complexities. So what might be important to the lesbians are not important to the gays, are not important to the trans, but what's important to the trans are not as important to the lesbians. So how do we then dictate advocacy at that complexity? It's sensitive, it's complex, it's personal. So when we're creating the Pride platform, we're actually looking at Pride in terms of creating an openness to how the community can express themselves, in
I,
opposed to.
yeah, I love the fact that you highlighting the fact that it's kind of fluid, because you don't want to control the narrative too much as the organizer. And I'm sure that's when this subject came up, you were like, okay, it's happening again. And as organizers, you probably know that something is going to be new in every Pride. Some theme is going to arch the march in itself. When you saw the conversations in the lead up to this year's Pride, what were your thoughts? When I look back, there were accusations of commercialization with pink washing, an open letter signed by the activist group No Go Berg Pride that was saying, look, this is a commercialized event. A good party actually came on as well, saying that Pride had lost its roots of activism. When all of that was happening, what were you thinking?
Let's debunk this, right? You have the open letter signed by BDS South Africa and the Palestinian Solidarity Campaign, as well as a group of faceless, nameless individuals. Here we are standing as the organizing committee in our full view for the world to see who we are. Number one. Number two, the initial open letter tabled a specific organization or entity in South Africa that was supposedly our main title sponsor. When we debunked that as being a false narrative, which was post the open letter going out in public, because no one had spoken to us about it, the narrative then changed. Pride is capitalistic. Now, let's talk about Pride being capitalistic, or rainbow washing, as they call it. Rainbow washing happens when brands that don't normally align to us as an LGBT community suddenly come out with something that has a rainbow logo on it, right? So the corporates that have been supporting Pride, if you look at them, they have deeply seated DE&I policies. So for those that don't know, it's equality and inclusive policies.
Okay.
They employ LGBT individuals 365 days of the year. They are at Pride because they want to show support, not to just us as a community, but to the people that they work with on a daily basis. Knowing that we as Pride do not have funds, we don't get government funding, we don't get any other means of income. As a team, we are not remunerated. We are volunteers that put this together from the community based on the fact that it is passionate to us for one or whatever reason. Then you look at the same person constantly calling for a boycott because Pride is capitalistic or Pride needs to be taken over.
Mm-hmm.
But at the end of the day, calling for a boycott, creating alternative spaces, and people still come to Pride, which means the community is telling you something.
Sure.
And maybe it's time to start listening.
Mm-hmm.
Because after this boycott, we had the biggest turnout in the history of Joburg Pride.
Wow.
So I'm actually not sure what to say. And then let's look at the No Goburg Pride organization and the people that are on a very big smear campaign.
Kay, can we look at that after the break? I need to take just a quick break. I want to give you enough time to respond to that. Just stay there and we'll speak about those other organizations that were labeling Pride Joburg as a capitalistic moment. We'll do that after the break.
Nkhanza zokhudza amuna ndi azimayi kapena kuti gender-based violence GBV zikuwononga mioyo komanso kuphwasula midzi. Zikuchitika m'manyumba, m'masukulu, malo ogwirira ntchito ndipo kwambiri mwakachetechete. Koma sizikuyenera kupitirira. Mukazimva yankhulani. Ngati mwakhuzidwa funani chithandizo. Chifukwa kusachita chilichonse sikuthandiza. Mverani kuma wireless onse 14 a SABC kuchokera lachitatu pa 23 mwezi uno wa Julai kuti mumve zokambirana, malangizo, masewero, zionetsero za maphunziro ndi mafunso okhuza nkhanza za amuna ndi azimayi ndi akatswiri, anthu opulumuka ku nkhanzazi, okhazikitsa lamulo komanso dziko lonse lokhuzidwa ndi nkhanzazi. Zonsezi pa wireless yomwe mumayikonda ya SABC. Imbirani pa nambala 0800 428 428 kuti munene za nkhanzazi kapena kupeza chithandizo. Nkhanza zokhuza amuna ndi azimayi zimatha ndi inu. Uthenga ukufikani kuchokera ku SABC.
Get Channel Africa on DS Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
All right, it's 23 minutes past 10 o'clock Central African time. You're still listening to On the Move with myself, Benjamin Moshatama. We're speaking to Kaye Ally, founder and director of Johannesburg Pride and also of Pride of Africa. Pride Johannesburg was out there. She highlights that, it was the biggest that they've ever seen in terms of the turnout, which is wonderful for the community. But we're looking at the accusations of the fact that the event was rainbow washing or pink washing, and Kay was still clarifying things out, and you were responding to the No Goburg Pride group and what they were calling for as a boycott. You can continue there, Kay, in terms of you straightening things out and what was happening here.
So I'm confused because a boycott means stay away. So No Goburg Pride is a non-officially registered or recognized entity. It's not a legal entity.
Yeah.
It doesn't function under the umbrella of a legal entity. So
Sure.
this is just a social media campaign run by individuals that do not want to be named or faced. I mean, they did end up attending the Pride March in masks. Now, I understand that there's a cry for what is happening in the Middle East, and there is a need to stop the genocide. And I'm even wearing black today. So there is that element of human rights activism that does have and warrants a very big place in our society. But as Pride, we as the LGBT community have our own needs that need to be visualized, and we have our own needs of awareness, not just in South Africa, but across Africa. And that is our mandate in terms of what Pride marches are meant for and have been for the last 50 years since its inception. So we allowed no Goldberg Pride protesters to participate in the march.
Mm-hmm.
And my mandate to the team was that doesn't matter what form of participation or protest they want to do, we need to make sure that we allow a non-violent expression from the activists. Their cause is obviously important, but the reality still remains that Johannesburg Pride has taken months of planning. There's a lot of running, a lot of bylaws that we have to comply with. That costs a lot of money. For us to maintain Pride as a free event, we obviously need to raise that somewhere. Now, when I look at activists that are now calling for Pride that is capitalistic, I look at myself and I ask myself the question, are you ignorant? Because you're working in a sector that is funded by Tides Foundation, Kellogg Foundation, Ford Foundation, Mark Foundation, Nelson Mandela Foundation, Nelson Mandela Children's Fund. Let's name any foundation you can think of. Where do you think they are getting their funding?
Okay,
That funding
yeah.
is from corporates.
Sure. Okay, I want us not to dwell too much on some of these accusations, but let's get the idea of maybe we misunderstand who is to target for some of these things, because I think this could have caused harm for a Pride Johannesburg if people just went into the accusations. But I feel like, what's your thought in terms of how these conversations around rainbow washing, pink washing are unfolding in the public debate? When you privately think about it, what do you think is happening here?
The reality is that there is a particular person, and I'm not going to get into it right now, that constantly calls for this boycott 2 or 3 days before Johannesburg Pride. It's a pattern. If you go back and Google, you'll see the pattern. I don't know if it's out of spite, but I think that, every time the person calls for a boycott, the community comes out louder, community comes out stronger.
That's beautiful.
There has been no dialogue with us. So we have never met face to face. No one has approached us. My contact details are public
Sure.
knowledge. I am public knowledge. I am very accessible to dialogue. I talk to the community. Even at Pride, I mingle through the crowd consistently, understanding and listening to what people are saying. So, at the end of the day, we're not going to please everyone. But I think if you look at the turnout this year for Johannesburg Pride March, including the Nogoba Pride protesters, we are definitely that platform of inclusivity.
I love that you also involved them, and your take on these new ideas, like these phrases, rainbow washing. Do you think they're genuine, or do you think it's still a way of controlling the narrative of the community?
I think it's still a way of controlling the narrative of the community, because if you look at it, are we not all in some way washed? We all have corporate jobs. We all, in your daily lives, you look at brands that you like, brands that you don't like, things that you do work. You work towards buying something that is known out there. So whether it has a rainbow sticker on it or not, you have some preferences. And I think where we are now, we need to allow people we need to allow in our minds as activists, as community leaders, that people have preferences and people will go where they want to and buy what they want to and support the brands that they want. If you want a specific brand of car for whatever reasons, whether it's got a motor plan or you just like it or the look of it, no one can tell you otherwise.
And also,
We need to stop indoctrination.
Sure.
Yeah.
And I was thinking, like, as a wrap up, what's wrong with commercializing something like a Pride where it can be self-sustaining and you don't have to worry about money, Kaye?
I wish I could get to that day. But I think, I think that the reality is that we don't have the type of brands that are commercializing. So you're looking at, creams or consumerized retail goods. You're looking at our allyship as from within organizations in South Africa, global organizations operating in South Africa, that have a very strong alignment to the LGBT community in terms of their policy.
Okay.
They lead social equity and inclusion strategies. They have some of the oldest strategies of that nature in the world. So our alignment is very, very clear. We don't just align for the sake of funds. We align for the sake of essence, ethos. There needs to be a match of principles.
Yeah, absolutely. We have to leave it there. And it's a complex one, this one, because I'm also trying to understand why we have to, or we don't do that with other things, with other marches, with other events or other interests. And why should we have that label put on to an event that is associated with the LGBTQIA plus community? If someone wants just to fund one event at one go, maybe they don't want to. I don't understand it myself, but I think it continues to be a conversation that needs to happen on how we also project onto how the LGBTQIA plus community is and what we want them to be. And I think sometimes we project ideas onto the community itself. Kaye, unfortunately, we have to leave it there. Thank you for joining us.
Pleasure.
Well, that's Kaye Ally, founder and director of Johannesburg Pride and Pride of Africa. What's